I remember the day. They said my mother stole the ring because the house smelled like oranges and rain, and I was trying to count the tiles on the kitchen floor to stop the coughing from sounding too loud. And Mama told me not to worry, that every cough was just a little bird flying out of my chest and none of them could carry me away. She said things like that because she was a refugee, and refugees learn how to braid fear into lullabies. And I believed her because the lullabies worked until the doorbell rang and the woman with the ocean-colored coat stepped in without wiping her shoes. The woman was called Mrs. Valentina, and the house was hers and the ring was hers too. The one everyone whispered about. The diamond that winked, even in the dark like a tiny moon that forgot it belonged to the sky. People in big houses don't whisper softly. They whisper like they expect the walls to agree. And in that kitchen, with oranges on the counter and rain on the windows, her whisper turned into a storm. "Where is my ring?" she said. Not to me, to the air around Mama, like the air would apologize for her. Mama stood very straight the way she does when the world tries to bend her. And she said, "I do not know, Senora," in the careful voice she uses when her accent is a heavy coat she can't take off. I wanted to raise my hand the way I do at school and tell them that Mama's hands were dry and cracked from scrubbing the marble and the silver and the places where the house hides its dust. And that cracked hands don't steal. They hold and they help and they heal. But my cough took the words and shook them. And all that came out was a sound like the drawer where they kept the spoons. The drawer that used to stick until Mama fixed it with a bar of soap and a smile. I am 8 years old and I know the things adults pretend to forget. I know the way money makes people louder and the way sickness makes rooms smaller. For mornings my pills have run out and Mama had stood in line at the clinic with a number that never got called. And when evening came, she came home with the smell of other people's sadness in her hair. On the 5th morning, I heard her praying in whispers. Not the kind of prayer that asks for miracles. The kind that asks for buses to be on time and for nurses to be patient and for a little more room between one breath and the next. The day the ring disappeared was the day Mama's hope ran out before the rain did. When Mrs. Valentina asked again, "Where is my ring?" Mama's eyes did something I had not seen before. They made a decision. It was like watching a bridge appear where there had only been water. "I can find it," Mama said, and her voice was a soft broom sweeping worry away. "Give me an hour, but hours belong to the rich in that house. Minutes do, too. You don't find what you've taken," said the woman in the ocean coat. And the room seemed to shrink around the diamond that wasn't there. Men in suits came next, not the police. The kind with clipboards and mouths that practice being thin. And they looked at the empty velvet box on the dressing table and then at Mama. And one of them asked for her identification, as if a small plastic card could explain the way a person survives. An ocean and a border and 5 jobs that all pay by the hour. Mama gave him the card and her hands did not shake. Mine did, but I hid them in the sleeves of the sweater my grandmother knit before we left home. The one that still smells like a place. The map says is far away, but my heart says is behind the next door. "Search the staff quarters," said the man with the thin mouth. And I learned that rooms can flinch because ours did. The way the walls pulled back when strange hands opened the drawers where we keep socks and the little brown bottle that makes my chest quieter. The bottle was empty and they handled it like a clue until Mama said, "It is for my daughter." And then the bottle was only a bottle again and the thin mouth looked thinner. When they didn't find a ring in a room too small to hide a secret, they searched Mama's bag and I watched the pairs of hands pull out our life. The cloth-wrapped bread, the photo of me at the seaside with a green kite, the bus pass with tape like a second skin, and the envelope with coins and a folded paper from the clinic that said we owed nothing and were given nothing. "You can stop now," Mama said calmly, the way you talk to a dog that doesn't know it is lost. "We are finished, but People who are certain you are guilty never hear the word finished in your voice. They keep looking for a way to make their certainty true, and sometimes they find it even if it isn't there. The ring was found in a place that was too obvious, too easy, too cruel, inside the pocket of Mama's coat hanging by the back door, where the raincoats live and the smell of lemons never reaches. I saw the flash before I understood the shape, and the room took a breath like a gasp, and the man with the thin mouth said, there, like a magician proud of a trick anyone could do with enough meanness. Mama did not touch it. She did not move toward it or away. She looked at me instead, and her eyes told me a story in 1 second. Trust me, stay small, breathe. That is not mine, she said softly, and perhaps for a pebble-sized moment. Nobody spoke because the truth had walked into the room and sat down on the floor with me. Then the ocean coat woman tried to be taller than she already was, and she said words about police and charges and trust broken like glass. And Mama nodded once, as if to say, yes, glass breaks, but people do not have to. The police did come, 2 of them, a woman and a man, and the woman officer's eyes were kinder than the uniform allowed. And when Mama asked if I could sit on the kitchen chair by the oranges instead of where the marble made my legs cold, she said yes. The man asked questions that wanted to be answers. Where were you at this time? Who saw you last? Why was your coat by the back door? Had you ever been near the ring box? Mama told the truth in the same steady voice she uses to measure flour and keep promises. I tried to make my coughs quiet so the truth could be louder. The officers took the ring and put it in a small bag that made a crinkling noise that hurt my ears. And they told us to come to the station in the morning to make statements. And the woman with the ocean coat said, the word tribunal the way people say thunder when they are indoors. And the men with the thin mouths wrote down our names like they were trying to make letters into cages. We walked home under umbrellas that weren't ours. And the city felt like it wanted to be kind, but had forgotten how. Our building is the kind where the hallways know your footsteps, and the elevator counts your size. And when we got inside, Mama took off my wet sweater and wrapped me in the big towel that smells like sun. And she said, we'll be brave tomorrow. And I said, I can be brave now. And she smiled and pressed her forehead to mine and said, then we will be brave twice. That night I could not sleep because the cough birds kept flying and the clock on the stove was stuck between 2 chimes. And I heard Mama in the other room take the shoebox down from the top shelf where she keeps papers. And the letter from the aunt who didn't make it across. And I heard the sound of counting, not money, hearts. I got up and stood in the doorway and saw her hold the empty medicine bottle, like she was measuring it with her eyes. And then she put on her coat, not the coat with the ring story in its pocket, her old coat with patches like islands. And I said, where are you going? And she said, only to the corner. And I asked, for oranges? And she said, for a miracle. She left and came back with wind in her hair and the smell of a pawn shop in her hands. And she tucked a paper envelope into the shoebox and took out a small bottle that made my chest feel quieter just by being in the room. Mama, I whispered, and she said, sleep, little bird. And I slept because love can be medicine even before you swallow it. In the morning, the city wore its serious face and the buses were crowded with people who forgot to be gentle because time makes us all forget. And we rode to the station where the walls were painted the color of waiting. Mama spoke to a woman behind a glass that reflected my freckles like stars. And then we sat on chairs that squeaked. And a man with a kind mustache gave me water from a paper cone that tasted like paper. Will they listen? I asked in a whisper, and Mama said, they will hear. And I asked, is that the same? And she said, not always. And the way she said it made me want to grow up faster so I could build a world where it was. When they asked about the ring again, Mama used the same words because the truth doesn't need costumes. when they asked about the pawn shop, because somehow the world always knows the places where desperation buys one more day. She nodded and said, yes, and she opened her hands so they could see they were empty of lies. Why did you sell a ring? A man asked. To buy medicine, Mama said. And then she looked at me and added, for my daughter. The room changed a little right then, like a window opened that had been painted shut. Whose ring? Another question. Normal words turned sharp. My mother's ring, Mama said. And the way she said mother made the word bigger than the room. A small gold band, not a diamond moon. She said she had worn it inside her coat since the day we crossed the border because it felt like carrying a piece of home on a string. And that yesterday she took it off and took it to a shop with a sign that said, we buy stories in letters that pretended to say gold because signs don't know the difference. And she used the money to buy the bottle that made my chest listen to the rest of me. I can show you the receipt, she added. And the way the officer's shoulders softened told me paper can be a kind of kindness when it tells the truth. They took the paper and made copies and gave the paper back. And the copier made a noise that sounded like a small animal complaining. And I wanted to tell it that we were all trying our best. We walked out into a morning that had decided to be blue after all. And for a block we were to people in a city that could be anything. And then a phone rang in Mama's pocket and the ocean voice was back. And she said the word tribunal again. And the word tomorrow and the words. Bring the girl! And my hand found Mama's and squeezed because sometimes children are anchors and sometimes they are wings and sometimes they are both. And Mama squeezed back and said, you do not have to speak. And I said, but I can. And she looked at me and her eyes were the color of the place we left and she said, you are my brave twice. That afternoon, we went to the pawn shop together because Mama said, I should see everything that is part of the truth. And the man behind the glass had tattoos that told stories of boats and saints and mistakes. And he remembered Mama and the little gold ring with the scratch that looks like a smile. And he said, I pay fair, as if fairness could be measured by metal alone. And he printed another paper that said numbers, which are a kind of sad that adults understand. We took the paper and the bottle and we took me and my cough birds, which were quiet now as if listening. And we went home to the oranges and the clock that forgot itself. And we laid the papers in the shoebox like blankets. At night, Mama ironed my blue dress and sewed a button that had been missing like a small moon coming back to the sky. And she braided my hair so gently that I did not notice when tears fell from her chin onto the sleeves she had mended last week. And she said, tomorrow we tell them who we are. And I asked, who are we? And she said, people who do not let hunger turn us into thieves. And I held the small wrench Grandpa gave me before we left. He said it was for fixing little things, but I think it was for learning how to hold on. And I whispered, I will tell them. And Mama said, only if you want. And I said, I want. I fell asleep to the sound of her practicing answers into languages, because the truth sometimes needs a translator. And I dreamed of a courtroom where the judge had eyes like the woman officer and the benches were soft and everyone brought oranges to share. And when I woke up it was still just our small apartment and the morning light and a world that doesn't always remember to be kind. And Mama was already dressed, her coat patched with islands and her shoulders set like a bridge no storm could break. And she kissed my forehead and said, let us go be brave twice. And I coughed once as if to say I am ready. And we walked out the door with the shoebox and the papers and the bottle and the truth. And I promised the air that I would speak if I had to. And the air promised me that sometimes, if you speak softly enough, even courts can listen. The next morning, the city felt like it was holding its breath. The buses groaned as if they were too tired to carry everyone's stories. Mama held my hand tighter than usual, not because she was afraid. I think she was trying to borrow courage from me. I had plenty, I'd saved it overnight under my pillow. We didn't talk much on the way. The wind did most of the talking, whispering down the streets in a language only mothers understand. Mama kept her eyes forward, her coat buttoned to the neck, and the shoebox pressed to her chest. Inside it were all the pieces of our life, the pawn shop receipt, the clinic paper, the medicine bottle, the photo of me with my kite. Proof that love can be written in ink and folded into cardboard. When we arrived at the courthouse, it was bigger than I imagined. Its steps looked like they had been built for giants, or for people who never had to run to catch the bus. The doors were tall and heavy, and they made a sound like thunder when they closed. Everything inside smelled like fear and paper. A man with gray hair and a black robe sat behind a table at the front. He didn't look mean, just old in the way trees look old, full of years and waiting to listen. There were benches full of people, and I wondered if they were there for us or for other stories that sounded like ours. Mama guided me to our seat. Her hand trembled once, but when I looked up, she smiled. Brave twice, she whispered, and I nodded. Then she came in, Mrs. Valentina, wearing another ocean-colored coat, this one brighter, like she wanted the world to see she was untouched by the storm she caused. Her shoes clicked against the floor like small hammers of judgment. Behind her came a man in a suit with papers so thick they could have been walls. He looked at Mama like she was a word he didn't know how to pronounce. The judge began to speak. His voice was deep and slow, like it had to push through years of dust before it reached us. This hearing is to determine the accusation of theft against Miss Clara Duarte regarding the disappearance of Mrs. Valentina Roth's diamond ring. That was my mother's name, Clara Duarte. It sounded too small next to the word theft. He asked everyone to speak one at a time, but grown-ups don't always listen to their own rules. The lawyer with the papers stood first. My client, he said, pointing toward Mrs. Valentina, entrusted this woman, a recently hired domestic worker, with access to her home. Shortly thereafter, a diamond ring valued at $20,000 disappeared. It was later found in Miss Duarte's coat pocket. I could feel the air in the room change. It thickened like honey, sticky and slow. People shifted in their seats, and a murmur went around like wind through leaves. The lawyer continued, we ask that the court recognize the clear breach of trust and issue a sentence accordingly. When he sat down, Mama stood up. She didn't wait for anyone to tell her to speak. Her voice was soft but steady. Your Honor, I did not steal the ring. I have never stolen anything. The ring was not mine. I don't know how it got there. The lawyer smiled the way people do when they think they've already won. Convenient, isn't it? He said. Mama didn't reply. She just looked at the judge, then at me, and something in that silence spoke louder than words. The judge asked about the pawn shop receipt. Mama took the paper out carefully and handed it to him. I sold a ring that belonged to my mother, she said. A small one. Gold, not diamond. I used the money to buy medicine for my daughter. He studied the paper, reading slowly. This appears legitimate. The lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may, anyone can forge a receipt. The question is not whether she bought medicine, but how she afforded it. Mama's voice wavered for the first time. By selling what little I had, he laughed, just once, sharp as glass. A convenient story. The judge raised a hand. Enough. Then he looked at Mama again. Do you have the medicine? She opened the shoebox and held up the small brown bottle. Yes, the label was worn. The corners frayed from her fingers, holding it too long. The judge nodded, but the lawyer wasn't finished. Your Honor, he said, we can provide photographic proof that the ring found in her coat pocket matches my client's heirloom, the Roth diamond. Surely a woman in her financial position could not mistake that for another. The words a woman in her position hit like stones. I wanted to stand up, to tell them that Mama saw beauty in everything, even in broken cups, and that she didn't need diamonds to feel rich. But my knees were shaking and my hands were small, so I stayed quiet. Then I saw Mrs. Valentina watching us, her face a mask of calm. But her eyes were the coldest part of winter. The judge leaned back. "We will take a short recess," he said. "We'll resume in 15 minutes. Everyone started moving, stretching, whispering. Mama sat down slowly, her eyes closed. "Are you tired?" I asked. "No, little bird," she said. "Just remembering." "What?" "That truth is heavier when you carry it alone." When the recess ended, they called witnesses. The maid who worked the shift before Mama, a young woman named Rosa, said she saw nothing unusual. The gardener said he didn't know anything, just that Mama always brought extra bread for him on rainy days. Each word was small, but they started to build something solid, like a bridge of kindness strong enough to walk across. Then, finally, the lawyer for Mrs. Valentina called her to the stand. The whole room seemed to tilt. She sat down like someone used to being looked at. The lights caught her earrings. They sparkled like stars that had never been near dirt. "Mrs. Roth," said her lawyer, "tell us what happened." She sighed, dramatic, like the world had betrayed her. "I trusted her. I gave her a job, a roof, money. I even let her bring the child sometimes. And this is how she repays me." Her voice trembled at the end, but it wasn't sadness. It was pride trying to sound like pain. The lawyer nodded sympathetically. "And how did you find the ring?" She gestured with elegant fingers. "The police found it in her coat. She must have hidden it when she realized I was looking." "Are you certain it was your ring?" Her lips curved. "I would recognize it anywhere. My husband designed it himself." There was a gasp from the benches. People love love stories more than truth. Mama's face didn't move. She just kept her hands folded in her lap. When Mrs. Roth stepped down, I looked at her and thought she didn't seem as tall as before. Maybe guilt makes people smaller, even when they're standing on marble. Then the judge called my mother again. She stood, and for the first time, her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something that sounded like heartbreak and courage mixed together. "I understand what this looks like," she said, "but I also know what hunger looks like, what sickness sounds like, what love costs when it's all you have left to give. I did not steal your ring, Mrs. Roth. I sold my own. I sold a piece of my mother to save my daughter." There was silence, the kind that only comes when truth enters a room. But the lawyer broke it with a sneer. "Do you have any proof that this child was sick?" I could feel Mama's hand tighten beside me, and before she could answer, I stood up. I said. My voice cracked, but it didn't matter. Everyone turned to look. The judge, the lawyers, even the people in the back rows who had been pretending not to care. The lawyer blinked. "Excuse me? I was sick," I repeated. "Mama didn't steal. She sold her ring for my medicine. Please don't punish her." The words hung there like a banner no one could take down. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Young lady, please approach." Mama tried to stop me, whispering, "No, little bird," but I shook my head. I can be brave twice. When I stood before the judge, his face softened. "What is your name?" "Lena," I said. "And how old are you?" "Lena, 8. He smiled faintly. "That's very brave of you to speak." I nodded. I promised my mama I would tell the truth. He leaned forward. "Did your mother tell you what to say?" "No," I said. "She told me I don't have to speak. But the truth doesn't need permission." There was a murmur from the benches again. And I saw the woman officer, the one from the day before, standing in the back, her hand near her mouth like she was trying not to cry. The judge looked at me carefully. "Do you know what the word steal means?" "Yes," I said. "It means taking what isn't yours. But Mama only ever gives." Someone laughed nervously, but it stopped when the judge raised his hand. "Thank you, Lena," he said quietly. "You may go back to your seat." Mama took my hand when I returned. Her eyes were full, not of tears, but of light. She whispered, "You have wings now." And for the first time since this began, I felt the air move differently in the room, like the truth had started to breathe. The judge cleared his throat. "We'll reconvene tomorrow," he said. "There's more to review." Everyone stood, some whispering, some pretending not to. Mrs. Roth avoided our eyes as she left. Her coat swayed behind her like a tide pulling away from the shore. When we stepped outside, the cold wind met us again. Mama exhaled slowly, and I saw her shoulders drop. "Did I do okay?" I asked. She knelt and touched my face. "You did more than okay, little bird. You made the world listen." We walked home together under the gray sky. Behind us, the courthouse stood still, but I swear, for a moment, I thought I heard it whisper too. The next morning, the sky was pale and slow, like it hadn't slept. Mama made tea with more sugar than usual, saying sweet things taste like courage. I didn't tell her I could see her hands tremble when she poured the water. She tried to hide her fear the same way she hid the holes in her gloves, by folding her fingers gently so no one would notice. When we reached the courthouse, it was quieter than before. Maybe everyone was tired of anger. Maybe even walls can get weary of hearing the same accusations echo every day. The woman officer was there again, standing near the entrance. She bent down and whispered, "You were very brave yesterday, Lena." I smiled. I had to be. Mama said truth gets lost if no one carries it. The officer nodded. "Your mother's a wise woman." When the hearing started, the lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor, before proceeding, my client would like to present additional evidence. A piece of jewelry found yesterday evening in the possession of the accused." He lifted a small plastic bag. Inside, a silver necklace glimmered faintly under the light. Whispers spread through the room like smoke. My chest tightened. I turned to Mama. She didn't move. "That necklace," the lawyer said, "was discovered by Mrs. Roth's household staff when collecting the belongings Miss Duarte left behind. It was hidden in a drawer in her room." Mama's lips parted just slightly, enough for a breath, not enough for a word. "That's not," she started, but the lawyer cut her off. Mama thanked her softly, and then the doors opened. The air inside was heavy again, the smell of cold coffee, paper, and nerves. The same faces were there, but something was different. The judge looked less certain, and the lawyer's smile had gotten sharper, like a knife that had been sharpened too often. "It bears the initials VR, for Valentina Roth, another item belonging to my client. I think the pattern speaks for itself." The judge raised his hand. "Let her speak, Mr. Collins." Mama's voice was quiet but clear. "That necklace was a gift. She gave it to me." Laughter burst from the back of the room, quick, mean laughter. Even the lawyer smirked. Mrs. Roth stood and said, "That's ridiculous. Why would I ever give away something like that?" Mama met her eyes. "Because your daughter asked you to." The room stilled. "What did you say?" the lawyer asked. "Your daughter, Sophia. She saw me crying once by the laundry room. She asked why, and I told her it was because I missed my home. She said she wanted to make me feel better. Later that day, she came with the necklace in a small box. She said, 'Mama doesn't wear this one anymore.'" Mrs. Roth's face froze, but her eyes flickered. "Just once, just enough. She was a child," Mama continued. "I told her no, that I couldn't accept it. She said she would tell you. And when I reminded her to ask first, she laughed and said, 'Mama never notices what's gone.'" The words hung in the air, light but heavy. The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof of this interaction?" "No, Your Honor, but Sophia does." Everyone turned slowly, all at once, toward the door. And there she was, a small figure in a yellow coat, holding the hand of the woman officer, Mrs. Roth's daughter. The woman officer spoke softly. "Your Honor, this child came to the precinct early this morning." She asked to speak. The judge blinked. "Does she have permission from her parents?" Mrs. Roth's lawyer stood quickly. "Absolutely not. This is..." But Sophia interrupted. "I gave it to her." Her voice was small but sure. "The necklace. I gave it to Miss Clara." The courtroom turned silent in an instant. The kind of silence that makes you hear your heartbeat. Mrs. Roth's lips parted, but no sound came. The lawyer turned pale. Sophia stepped closer. I liked her. She told me stories while she cleaned. She said my drawings looked like sunshine. I wanted to give her something nice. I took the necklace from my mother's drawer. She told me to put it back, but I forgot. When I remembered, it was too late. The judge looked at her kindly. And what about the ring, Sophia? Her little hands twisted together. I saw that too. What did you see? Ma was looking for it, and then she found it in Miss Clara's coat. But I saw something before that. Everyone leaned forward. I saw Marta, the other housekeeper, take the coat and hang it up before Mama came home. She had something shiny in her hand. A sharp intake of breath went through the room. The lawyer spoke up, nervous now. This is a child's imagination, surely. But the judge cut him off. We'll question this Marta. Do we have her information? Mama shook her head. She left 2 days ago. Said she was moving to another city. The woman officer raised her hand. We can find her, Your Honor. There's a work visa on file. The judge nodded. Do so immediately. For now. We will recess again until this matter is clarified. When the session ended, chaos erupted, reporters whispering, people buzzing, Mrs. Roth frozen in her chair. Sophia ran toward Mama and hugged her waist. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know they'd be mean. Mama bent down and hugged her back, tears falling silently into the little girl's hair. You were brave, Sophia, she said. Sometimes being brave means telling the truth, even when it scares grown-ups. Mrs. Roth stood, trembling now, her composure cracking like ice in sunlight. She looked at her daughter, then at Mama, and then turned away without a word. Outside, the world looked new, still cold, but softer. The snow that had been gray yesterday sparkled a little. I held Mama's hand, and we walked with Sophia and the officer to the edge of the courthouse steps. Will they believe us now? I asked. Mama smiled faintly. Truth takes its time, little bird, but it never loses its way. The officer nodded. We'll find that other woman. And when we do, this will all make sense. Sophia looked up at Mama. Do you think my mother will forgive me? Mama touched her cheek gently. I think mothers forgive before they even know they have to. That night, the apartment felt lighter. Mama made soup, real soup, with vegetables and not just hope. I watched her stir it and thought she looked younger when she wasn't afraid. Will they still call you a thief? I asked. Some will, she said. But names don't stick when you live the truth long enough. I thought about Sophia, about how her small voice had changed everything. And I realized that sometimes the world just needs to hear something honest from someone who hasn't learned how to lie yet. Mama saw me smiling and said, What are you thinking? That maybe tomorrow will be a good day. She leaned down and kissed my forehead. Then let's make it one. The next morning began with the sound of footsteps, fast, nervous ones, running down the hall outside our apartment. Then came a knock, sharp but not angry. When Mama opened the door, it was the woman officer again. Her coat still wet with dawn. Her eyes were tired, but her mouth was set like she had something important to say. We found her, she said simply. Marta, Mama asked, her voice small but steady. The officer nodded. She was working to towns over. We brought her in. The judge wants you at the courthouse by 9. Mama closed her eyes, whispering something I couldn't hear. Maybe a thank you, maybe a prayer. She looked at me and said, It's almost over, little bird. I didn't know if she meant the case or the kind of fear that lies in your chest when the world doesn't believe you. But either way, her voice made me believe it too. The courthouse looked different that day, brighter, maybe. It was the light through the high windows. Or maybe it was hope, which always changes how things look. Even Mrs. Roth seemed smaller somehow, like her ocean-colored coat had lost some of its waves. They brought Marta in through the side door. She looked different from how I remembered. Her hair messier, her eyes darting around like a trapped bird's. She wouldn't meet Mama's eyes. The room was quiet except for the sound of her shoes scraping against the floor. The judge entered, and everyone stood. His tone was sharper this time, not cruel, just tired of lies. We're here to continue the case of Mrs. Roth versus Miss Duarte, he began. We have located a new witness whose testimony may shed light on the events in question. The lawyer for Mrs. Roth stood. Your Honor, I must protest. Sit down, Mr. Collins, the judge said, not unkindly, but with the weight of someone who has seen too many protests crumble under truth. Marta sat in the witness chair. She clutched the edge of her skirt with trembling hands. The judge asked gently, do you understand why you're here? Yes, sir, she said, barely above a whisper. Do you understand that what you say must be the truth? She nodded. Yes. Then tell us what happened the day of the missing ring. She swallowed. I was cleaning the bedrooms that morning. Mrs. Roth left early for a meeting. Miss Duarte came in later, after taking her daughter to the clinic. I was supposed to clean the guest bathroom. I saw the ring box open on the dresser. And her voice broke. She looked down at her hands. You what? The judge asked softly. I didn't take it, she said quickly, shaking her head. But I saw something shiny in the laundry basket. I thought it was trash, a hair clip, maybe. When I picked it up, I realized it was the ring. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. If I told anyone I found it, they'd think I stole it. If I kept it, I'd really be a thief. I didn't think. The lawyer stood abruptly. Your Honor, this sounds rehearsed. The judge glared. You'll have your turn, Mr. Collins. Let her finish. Marta's voice trembled again. I put it in Miss Duarte's coat pocket. I swear I didn't mean harm. I was scared. I thought maybe she'd find it and return it. I didn't know they'd blame her. The room froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. I looked at Mama. She was sitting perfectly still, eyes open but full of something deep. Not anger, not shock, something else. Something that sounded like relief mixed with heartbreak. Mrs. Roth's face turned pale. You expect us to believe that? She said sharply. Marta turned toward her. I don't expect anything. I just couldn't keep it anymore. The judge leaned back. So you placed the ring in Miss Duarte's coat pocket? Yes, sir. Did anyone ask you to do this? Marta hesitated. No, I did it myself. But her eyes flickered toward Mrs. Roth's lawyer for the briefest second. The kind of look that speaks louder than words. The judge noticed too. Miss Duarte, he said, please step forward. Mama stood, her shoulders straight, her steps slow. Yes, Your Honor. He looked at her with something almost like admiration. You've been accused, humiliated, and yet you've spoken with dignity throughout. Do you have anything you'd like to say before I make my ruling? Mama took a deep breath. Only this, I forgive her. The room murmured. Even Marta looked up, her face wet with disbelief. Mama continued, I forgive her because fear makes people do foolish things. I forgive her because I've been afraid too. But fear should never be used as a weapon. It only builds more cages. The judge nodded slowly, as if memorizing every word. Thank you. He turned to Marta. Do you confirm this is your full statement? Given freely and truthfully. She nodded again, crying openly now. Yes. Then I have no further questions. Silence hung for a moment. Then the gavel struck wood. Once, twice, final. This court finds Miss Duarte not guilty of theft. Furthermore, the court acknowledges the exceptional integrity she has demonstrated throughout this process. A sound escaped me, half gasp, half laugh. The kind that only happens when something too heavy finally lifts. Mama closed her eyes. I think she was praying again, but this time her lips curved upward. The judge wasn't finished. He looked at Mrs. Roth, whose face was tight with embarrassment and pride colliding. Mrs. Roth, he said carefully, I strongly advise you to consider how your assumptions led to this situation. The court will not pursue charges against you, but perhaps reflection will serve as its own sentence. Mrs. Roth didn't answer. She just stared at Mama for a long time, as if seeing her for the first time, not as a maid, not as a stranger, but as something harder to look at, the truth. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again, soft, slow, forgiving. Marta approached Mama, trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll never forgive myself." Mama smiled, tired, warm, real. "Then forgive someone else first. It helps." Marta nodded through tears and walked away, shoulders hunched but lighter. The woman officer came over next, her expression gentle. "It's done," she said. "You can breathe now." Mama laughed quietly, like the sound of the first rain after drought. "I don't think I've stopped holding my breath for years." The officer knelt down to look at me. "You're one of the bravest girls I've ever met, Lena," I said. "Mama says bravery is like a song. You just have to start it." She smiled. "Then keep singing." As we walked home, the city looked softer than I remembered. The buildings seemed closer, the sky lower, like everything wanted to hug us. At the bus stop, Mama looked at me and said, "Do you know what today means?" "It means they know you didn't do it," I said. She shook her head gently. "It means we can start again." That night, Mama took the shoebox from the shelf. She opened it, took out the pawn ticket, and looked at it for a long time. Then she smiled and said, "Tomorrow, we'll get your medicine and the ring back." "The ring?" I asked, surprised. "Yes," she said. "My mother's ring. The one I sold. It's time we brought it home." I went to sleep with the feeling that the world was bigger again. Not because it had changed, but because we had survived it. Outside, the snow kept falling, and for the first time, it didn't look cold. The day after the trial, sunlight finally decided to come back. It slipped through the cracks in our curtains like a shy guest, touching the chip table, the teacups, the small shoebox that had waited on top of the fridge all night, the same one that had carried our truth into the courtroom and brought it back unbroken. Mama sat beside it quietly, hands folded in her lap. She wasn't crying. She just kept staring at the light, like it was something she hadn't seen in years. "Can we go now?" I asked, holding the old pawn receipt in both hands like it was treasure. She smiled, the kind of smile that starts slow but fills the whole room when it arrives. "Yes, little bird," she said. "It's time to bring her ring home. We took the early bus, the one with cracked windows and kind drivers." The city was awake but soft, as if the world was whispering instead of shouting. Mama wore her patched coat, the one that had been accused before the truth defended it. And I wore my blue dress, freshly ironed, with the button she sewed back on before the trial. When we stepped off at the corner where the pawn shop sat, the sign still blinked "We buy gold," but one of the letters had gone out, so it just said "We buy go." I giggled. Mama looked at it and said, "Maybe that's what we did. We bought the right to go forward." The shopkeeper remembered her. He was the kind of man whose eyes always looked tired but kind, like he'd seen too many people sell their memories and wanted to give them all back if he could. He said softly. The woman with the ring, Mama nodded and handed him the paper. I came to reclaim it. He took the receipt, looked at it carefully, then at her. "You can have it back for the same price." I kept it safe. Something about it told me it was special. Mama opened her small wallet, the same one that had been nearly empty for months. This time, there were a few crisp bills inside, not many, but enough. The woman officer had returned her last paycheck personally that morning, with a note from the court confirming her innocence. Mama counted the money slowly, hands shaking just a little, then placed it on the counter. The man nodded and turned around. He reached into a small drawer and pulled out a velvet pouch, the kind people use for things they don't want to lose. He placed it in her hands carefully. "Here, she's home." Mama opened it. Inside was the thin gold ring, the one her mother had worn through the war, the one she'd crossed oceans with, The one she'd sold to buy my medicine. When her heart said yes, even though the world said no, she traced its curve with her thumb. And I swear I could see the years between them melt away. The poverty, the fear, the border crossings, the loneliness. She's been waiting for you, the shopkeeper said quietly. Mama smiled. We've all been waiting for something. Outside, the air felt lighter. Mama slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if forgiveness had measured her hand. She took mine and said, "Do you know what this means, Lena?" "That you're free," I said. She shook her head gently. "That we always were. We went to the bakery after that. The fancy one we used to pass but never enter. Mama bought one loaf of warm bread and 2 small pastries." The woman behind the counter smiled when she saw us. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "Everyone's been talking about you." Mama blinked. "About me?" "Yes," the woman said. "The paper printed your story. Refugee made clear of theft. Child's testimony melts the courtroom." Mama blushed, embarrassed and proud all at once. "I didn't want to melt anyone," she said softly. "Just the truth out of eyes." When we got home, we sat by the window and ate the bread slowly. It tasted like a miracle that had taken the long way around. Then there was a knock at the door, gentle, hesitant. Mama stood and opened it. It was Mrs. Roth. For a moment, no one spoke. She wasn't wearing her ocean-colored coat today. Just a plain sweater, the kind that doesn't make noise when you move. Her eyes looked smaller, and not because she was tired, because she was finally seeing. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Mama nodded. "Yes." Mrs. Roth stepped inside. Her gaze landed on me, then on the shoebox on the table. She took a breath. "I came to apologize." Mama didn't say anything. She waited. Mrs. Roth looked down. "I was cruel. I thought I understood kindness, but I only understood comfort. You gave everything, and I accused you of taking. I don't know how to live with that." Mama took a slow step forward. "By doing better." Mrs. Roth's eyes filled with tears. "I deserve the world's anger." "No," Mama said gently. "You deserve its lessons." There was silence, the kind that heals instead of hurts. Then Mrs. Roth reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. "This belongs to you," she said. "Your salary, and something more. My husband and I want to make sure you and your daughter are safe. There's an apartment, small, but yours. If you'll take it." Mama froze. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Mrs. Roth insisted. "It's not charity. It's an apology made of bricks instead of words." Mama looked at me, and I nodded. "Maybe we can paint the walls yellow," I said. For the first time, Mrs. Roth smiled, a real smile, the kind that doesn't hide behind money. Weeks passed. We moved into the small apartment. It had a balcony with space for 2 chairs and a pot of flowers. Mama planted basil because she said it smelled like home. She started working at a small community center teaching other women to read and write. Women who'd lost their voices somewhere between one country and another. Sometimes she'd touch the ring on her finger when she spoke to them. She told them, "You don't need papers to prove who you are. You just need your story and me." I started drawing again. Not circles this time, bridges, hands, suns. Mama said my drawings looked like the future learning to walk. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the judge. The envelope was thick, the handwriting careful. Mama opened it and read silently. Then she passed it to me. "To Miss Lena Duarte, you reminded us that truth can be spoken softly and still shake a room. You reminded grown-ups how to listen. If ever you forget what courage feels like, look in the mirror. It lies there now. With respect, Judge Elman." I kept the letter under my pillow for weeks. Sometimes I read it to the stars just to make sure they knew about us. One evening, Mama and I went walking by the river. The sky was pink, the kind of pink that looks like forgiveness learning to breathe. "Mama," I said, "what happens now?" She smiled. "Now we live." I looked at the water and said, And if the world forgets, she bent down beside me. Then we reminded. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear her voice, soft and certain, telling me stories about the grandmother I never met, the one whose ring came home, the one who taught her that even broken things can shine if you keep them close to love. And somewhere in that space between waking and dreaming, I imagined the ring glowing softly on Mama's hand, not like gold, but like light remembering how to stay.